Get all your back-to-school stuff at Staples. Everything's all here and ready to go, even if your kids aren't.
I thought you said school's out forever.
No. The song goes, school's out for summer. Nice try, though.
I buy Country Life because I think it tastes the best.
It's not about Great Britain, it's about Great Butter.
We have everything from lotteries, pinball machines. We had a football team, LA Kiss. We haven't tried to do it yet, but Christianity, a new religion, not bad. More deals, you hear that sound?
Rock legend Alice Cooper is facing fierce backlash after branding transgenderism as a fad. The comment was made during a recent interview where he pushed back against woke ideology and gender-affirming care for minors. And as a result, he is out of a deal. Vampire Cosmetics has decided to cut ties with the rocker now and issued a statement to the LGBTQ community. He now joins other music legends, including guitarist Carlos Santana, who previously came under fire for remarks about transgenderism.
Who do you think of when you think about famous musical rebels? Ozzy Osbourne lighting off a bat's head? The Sex Pistols playing God Save the Queen on the Thames? Kendrick Lamar performing The Black of the Berry at the Grammys? How about, now look, wait for this one, School's Out singer Alice Cooper, eh? Yeah? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to elaborate on this one, aren't I? Okay, Alice Cooper did a transphobia, but that's not the point of this video. Alice Cooper's transphobia is a part of a pattern of behaviour. A pattern of behaviour that paints a common picture of many musicians of his generation, from glam rock to punk rock, as much as it hurts me as a punk to admit. Alice Cooper's stage persona is that of a rebel, an outsider, a rule breaker. But the person he is when he's off the stage is just another conservative.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Hello, yes, hello, yes, you called? It's me, Bridget Empire, filling in as the music editor this week, and taking a break from my usual job as a science and culture correspondent for this here newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, the only newspaper in Britain that still finds it funny when someone says, Cooper, I don't even know her. That one was bad even for me. Anyway, I'm here today talking about Alice Cooper and how musicians can play the stage persona of a rebel and an outsider when behind the mask they are just another baby boomer who happens to put on fun stadium shows and happens to also hate trans people. Just like a lot of the boomers I cover on this here YouTube show. What is it about that generation? Anyway, Alice Cooper, the man who had precisely 2 songs worth remembering, one of which is secretly kind of shit, and we all just pretend to like it, unless you're Gen Z or younger, in which case you probably won't have heard of him at all, and frankly, I wish I had your ignorance of this chicken-murdering geriatric Tory, but I don't, so here we are. And now I have to introduce him to you anyway, so you're gonna learn. But let's back up, shall we, for those of you who were born after 9/11 and don't remember a time before the world was just constantly getting shitter and shitter by the day. Alice Cooper is an American glam rock / shock rock singer who's been pretty consistently performing for going on 50 years now, and frankly, considering he's admitted to having substance abuse problems in the past, it doesn't look that bad for a 75-year-old, although that might just be his makeup team. He wears makeup and is called Alice, like legally, since 1975, and yet he also thinks trans people are a problem. I do think I'm starting to develop a conspiracy theory in my head about the Poison singer here. Alice Cooper is an egg. Change my mind. Anyway, if you don't recognise Alice Cooper by his name, you'll recognise a couple of his songs upon hearing them. He's pretty prolific, he's been going since 1969 after all, and he shows no signs of stopping, even though, if we're honest, he probably should. Have a nap, talk to a trans person, and then you might stop mouthing off about things you don't understand, Alice. Instead of taking a nap, however, Alice Cooper did do something for his health, and fortunately it was giving up drinking, which apparently was the impetus behind him becoming a born-again Christian. Now, that might sound weird for someone who looks and performs the way Cooper does, but if you know anything about how the American version of Alcoholics Anonymous works, this won't be a surprise. Part of the 12-step program to give up alcohol is giving yourself over to God. It's a problem, but that's a separate video, and I don't want to risk turning this into one of those online atheist rant videos that were tired and overdone over a decade ago. About this conversion, Cooper told BBC Radio 2 that he credits God with taking alcoholism away.
Well, I mean, you know, if God can part the Red Sea and create the universe, he can certainly take alcoholism from somebody.
Alice Cooper remains Alice Cooper, however. He still performs on stage under his legal name, Alice Cooper, wears the goth aesthetic, all of that good stuff, even after admitting he's born again. He performs looking like he's about to sacrifice a goat to Baphomet, but that's not exactly unusual behaviour, as weird as that might sound at first. There is a whole generation of musicians whose visual aesthetic is designed to make them appear to be a rebel, even when their actions say the opposite. The Sex Pistols are actually a pretty good example of this. A lot of their supposed values turned out to be a little more than marketing at the end of the day, to the point where in the recent past, Johnny Rotten's been pictured wearing Trump merchandise and doing adverts for butter of all things, very anarchist of him. But the Sex Pistols put a lot more effort than most into their aesthetic of rebellion, and I'm talking more about people who, like, yes, Alice Cooper, but also Gene Simmons. Wear a bunch of makeup, make your whole stage persona about being the demon, and then behind the scenes the only thing you stand for is selling as much merchandise as possible, and occasionally coming out with really reactionary statements such as the time he called Islam a vile culture, the time he said people with depression should just hurry up and unalive themselves, or the excuses he's made for credible allegations of SA made against him by multiple women. There's a difference between being an actual rebel and wearing the aesthetics of rebellion. Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols wearing a swastika shirt isn't exactly very punk rock of him, and neither is famously picking a fight with Freddie Mercury backstage once. Apparently this was because the legendary Queen singer called him Stanley Ferocious, and said Queen's mission was bringing ballet to the masses, which based. This resulted in an altercation in which Freddie Mercury basically showed Vicious up, basically beating him in a physical fight, which embarrassed him a lot. Punch fascists, kids.
I called Sid Vicious, I called him Simon Ferocious or something, and he didn't like it at all. I said, what are you going to do about it?
Fred went up and took him by the lapels and pushed him out the door.
He hated the fact that I could even speak like that.
Right.
Now, at the end of this interaction, who comes out looking most like the rebel in the situation? In the end, both the Sex Pistols and Queen had big impacts on both music and the social climate, but Mercury behind the scenes was part of the counterculture. He was a queer man during the AIDS crisis, and I think people sometimes forget the climate these events were happening in. The National Front in the UK was on the rise at this time, and with governments all over the world still refusing to tackle HIV, thinking it a convenient way to rid themselves of their homosexual populations in what is essentially a genocide by neglect, being a gay immigrant, like Freddie Mercury was fucking tough. In retrospect, we see who wore the mask of rebellion to sell themselves to the public, and who was in it because in their very heart of hearts, they believed in fighting injustice. Alice Cooper, unfortunately, is very much the former.
It's not a good song. It's just catchy.
Much like the Sex Pistols, a lot of what made Alice Cooper's name as the godfather of shock rock was manufactured. He was famous for spectacle, and not in the regular light show kind of way. In a now legendary performance in Toronto in 1969, Alice Cooper's manager, Shep Gordon, stage managed the perfect introduction of Cooper to the world stage. It was arranged beforehand that Alice Cooper would play for $1 in the primetime slot between John Lennon in his first solo gig since leaving the Beatles and The Doors. Shep Gordon then released a live chicken on stage, thinking it would be a weird thing to happen. Alice threw the chicken into the crowd, thinking it could fly. The crowd tore the animal when it couldn't, limb from limb, and threw the pieces of the carcass back at Alice up on stage. Blood was everywhere. This was the moment that defined shock rock. But his music, outside of the visuals of a stage show, was basically just glam rock. Alice Cooper wasn't playing metal. He wasn't giving out a shocking political message either. The shock was in the spectacle of the live performance. And for the record, that's not a dig. It's just important to state here, because when we think of rebels, we think of political statements, social movements, outsiders threatening the status quo. And Alice Cooper wasn't so much that, as someone adding flavours of it to make his shows exciting. In fact, Alice Cooper is vehemently against involving politics in his music or in any music.
I'm extremely non-political. I go out of my way to be non-political. I'm probably the biggest moderate you know. You know, when John Lennon and Harry Nilsson used to argue politics, I was sitting right in the middle of them. And I was the guy who was going, I don't care. my parents would start talking politics, I would go in my room and put on the Rolling Stones or the Who, as long as I could avoid the politics. And I still feel that way.
As you can imagine from the fact that he made this statement, Alice Cooper wouldn't be seen as much of a rebel if he did talk about politics. He's a pretty bog-standard American conservative underneath all of the glamour and the alternative aesthetics. Despite the statement I just quoted from him, he's not actually non-political. He's just not the kind of political that would win him any favours with his audience. In fact, he accused musicians campaigning for John Kerry, who was running against George W. Bush in 2004, of committing treason against rock and roll.
I mean, if I wasn't already a Bush supporter, I would have switched immediately. You got, Linda Ronstadt, Don Henley? Jeez, that's a good enough reason right there to vote for Bush.
So, what does being anti-politics mean to him then? If he's open about voting for Bush, if he finds conversations about politics so jarring he has to leave the room, hell, he's a song called Elected and has run for president as a satire of the whole process several times, which seems pretty fucking political to me. In fact, in 2018, Alice Cooper argued that musicians talking politics to their fans was an abuse of power, which is inherently a hell of a political statement. So with all this in mind, what does being anti-political mean to Alice Cooper? It looks like, from what I've seen, being a conservative and a largely left-leaning, or at least liberal, subculture. From, like, all of the above. And more recently from his comments on trans people, which you can probably guess by now, they're pretty awful. On the 23rd of August, 2023, an interview with Alice Cooper was published by Stereogum, in which he, much like a lot of baby boomers of his age, went off on trans people in a way reminiscent of someone who spent the last 5 years watching Fox News and not speaking to a single trans person in real life. Referring to a 1974 interview with SPDC, in which Alice Cooper gave progressive for the time responses to questions about sexuality and gender, specifically,
in the future, everyone will be bisexual, okay? And lots of men who perform wear makeup, that's a theatrical tradition. It has nothing to do with sexuality.
And in light of Alice Cooper being someone who clearly, in the public eye, played with gender expectations and used gender ambiguity as part of his stage persona,
fucking gender ambiguity!
Cooper was asked what he thought about some of his fellow Stadium Rock colleagues joining the anti-transgender bandwagon. Cooper replied,
"Yeah, I'm understanding that there are cases of transgender, but I'm afraid that it's also a fad. I'm afraid that there's a lot of people claiming to be this just because they want to be that. I find it wrong when you've got a 6-year-old kid who has no idea. He just wants to play, and you're confusing him, telling him, yeah, you're a boy, but you could be a girl if you want to be." I think that's so confusing to a kid. It's even confusing to a teenager. You're still trying to find your identity, and yet here's this thing going on saying, yeah, but you can be anything you want. You can be a cat if you want to be. I mean, if you identify as a tree, and I'm going, come on, what are we, in a Kurt Vonnegut novel? It's so absurd that it's gone now to the point of absurdity. The whole woke thing, nobody can answer this question. Maybe you can. Who's making the rules? Is there a building somewhere in New York where people sit down every day and say, okay, we can't say mother now. We have to say birthing person. Get that out on the wire right now. Who is this person that's making these rules? I don't get it. I'm not being old school about it. I'm being logical about it. It's getting to the point now where it's laughable. If anybody was trying to make a point on this thing, they turned it into a huge comedy. I don't know one person that agrees with the woke thing. I don't know one person. Everyone I talk to says, isn't it stupid? And I'm going, well, I respect people. I respect people and who they are, but I'm not going to tell a 7-year-old boy, go put a dress on because maybe you're a girl. And he's going, no, I'm not, I'm a boy. So I say, let somebody at least become sexually aware of who they are before they start thinking about if they're a boy or a girl. A lot of times, I look at it this way, the logical way, right? If you have these genitals, you're a boy. If you have those genitals, you're a girl. There's a difference between I am a male who is a female, or I am a female that's a male and wanting to be a female. You were born male, okay? So that's a fact. You have these things here. Now the difference is you want to be a female. Okay, that's something you can do later on if you want to. but you're not a male born a female. And, well, I can see somebody really taking advantage of this, though. You know, a guy can walk into a woman's bathroom at any time and just say, I feel like I'm a woman today, and have the time of his life in there, and he's not in the least bit, you know, he's just taking advantage of that situation. Well, that's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna get raped, and the guy's gonna say, well, I felt like a girl that day, then I felt like a guy. Like, where do you draw the line? Something's gonna raise its ugly head, and all of a sudden, people are gonna start going, wait a minute, we gotta get this under control. It's almost like that with AI. People would say, well, what about AI? And I said, the only person that shouldn't have AI is Paul McCartney. It's dangerous.
These comments led, in a move that would be predictable to any non-boomer, to Alice Cooper losing his product deal with queer-owned cosmetics company Vampire Cosmetics. Turns out, if you want to keep good relations, it's probably best not to call your business partners a fad. Now, as much as I resent being compared to AI, despite my ability to draw hands being just about as bad.
Thumb. Finger. Other finger. Fuck.
This might seem surprising to someone who thinks Alice Cooper is synonymous with his onstage persona. A gender-fuck vampire trying to push the boundaries of what people can get away with on stage. But if you look beyond the surface to the person underneath, it's as unsurprising as it is sad. Alice Cooper isn't called Alice Cooper because he felt some kind of kinship with the transgender community. It was the name of his band, and then his stage persona precisely because, in his own words,
if you think Alice Cooper, you would expect to see a blonde folk singer, and what they see is me.
They wanted to pick a band name that sounded wholesome to contrast with their shock rock stage personas. Back in those days, being called Alice Cooper in everyday life wasn't something he was interested in. In fact, he said it was too dangerous. But he was always careful to make sure he wasn't representing a political message. But how are you making this statement in a way that avoids politics? You can't, not really. So it's not surprising that people associated him with progressive politics that he didn't seem to have. He did seem more progressive when he was younger, sure, but most of that impression is just the aesthetics of being a boundary pusher for theatrics. In fact, him being a man wearing makeup is something he refers to as being an element of horror he was adding to his persona, which in retrospect is a little bit of a red flag. From Far Out magazine. Cooper's influence in those early days of experimenting with physical appearance and public persona is no secret. In his book, Alice Cooper, Golf Monster, Cooper explained that his look was partially taken from films, with figures like Bette Davis forging a strong imprint on his mind. When he saw the film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane starring Davis, his calling became clear.
In the movie, Bet wears disgusting caked makeup smeared on her face and underneath her eyes with deep, dark black eyeliner.
In the same article, Far Out describes Cooper as using their androgyny for pure entertainment, to create an impressive spectacle rather than being forthcoming with any kind of political statement. And I think this was Alice Cooper's intention, despite how it looked to people on the outside. So, as a side effect, Cooper created this impression of someone who was progressive and inclusive, which is admittedly pretty hard not to do when you're performing glam rock, with its inherent flamboyance, massive set pieces and beyond. It's camp. And even if he was enacting being executed in an electric chair, he was still doing it in sequins and makeup and singing pretty safe radio rock anthems. And yet he calls trans people laughable. You might take a look at this and think that this is just a person growing older. Even someone who was progressive in their youth might not appear progressive when they're older if society moves faster than their political attitudes do. But I think in this case, the public just misunderstood Alice Cooper, just as much as Alice Cooper misunderstood his audience. Alice Cooper wears the aesthetics of rebellion to put on a spectacle, to sell tickets, to make a name for himself. And the people who are buying it expect true rebellion from him. But he's not a rebel in his heart. He's not performing punk, or hip-hop, or grime, or any of the myriad of genres of protest. He's performing stadium rock. Radio rock, and his songs are not about anything approaching something that pushes anywhere near the same boundaries as his stage shows do visually. I think with Alice Cooper, this may truly have been a mutual misunderstanding, but that doesn't excuse his comments. I will admit though, there is some evidence that he was more accepting before sobering up and being born again, even being quoted as saying,
"Everyone is part man and part woman, and you gotta accept both parts if your head is together."
And that might sound like he's open to trans people, especially non-binary trans people, maybe even being one himself, but this combined with his previous comments about everyone being bisexual, I think he never thought about this as it relates to gender. And while he might have been more socially progressive in his early years, at least a little bit, any indication of his politics tells us that he has been conservative, at least with a small c, for the majority of his professional life. No matter what he might do on stage or sing about to provoke a reaction, Alice Cooper is a public persona, but the man behind it, no matter how creative, clearly thinks trans people are a potential threat. And yet, despite whatever Cooper might think, trans people are not a threat. His legitimate concerns about bathroom predators are completely unfounded scare stories made to spread fear and loathing of trans people. Alice Cooper is wrong about trans people, but we shouldn't have expected anything less from someone who openly abhors politics while openly supporting George W. Bush. Whatever concerns Cooper has just gives him away as someone who only wears rebellion as a mask. He has no interest in actually fighting for those who are in danger, no interest in provoking thought beyond a gasp at a stunning visual or an unusual line in a song, and he certainly has not kept up with the times in regards to what side you're fighting on if you want people to buy your stage persona as an outsider and a boundary pusher. A lot of online conservatives like to repeat the adage that conservatism is the new punk rock, but that's absurd. Conservatives are in power all over the world. Being conservative is the opposite of being counterculture, about deconstructing hierarchies and the idea of who is allowed to make music and for whom that made punk so exciting. Conservatism is not the new punk rock. Hell, in some aspects, punk rock wasn't even the new punk rock if you're thinking of punk as the Sex Pistols, who were basically made in a lab to stir up controversy while giving no message but nihilism. The real punk rock was happening in the black punk scene, with the anarcho-punks that came after the first wave in Britain. The new punk rock after that was usually to be found in rap, gangster rap, conscious rap, grime. All of these genres carried on the spirit of what we mean when we say something is the new punk rock. Whatever the new punk rock of now is, Alice Cooper certainly isn't it. Glam rock wasn't even the new punk rock when it started. Beyond all of this, we don't need Alice Cooper to be on our side. Beyond a couple of catchy songs and his legacy as a stage performer, today's Alice Cooper is very much yesterday's rebel. A face to shock on a man that didn't truly care about making a difference for people at all. We have an ample supply of actual rebels who genuinely practice rebellion, beyond backcombing their hair and putting on eyeliner. Even when Alice Cooper started out, we had that. His rise was almost contemporary with the rise of punk itself. After all, despite how much I've ragged on the one punk band everyone knows in this video, I'm a huge punk fan. And there were hundreds of artists that were truly embodying the spirit of the rebel at this time, beyond aesthetics, beyond the promise to shock a crowd at sellout shows. And now we have even more. In the age of the internet and our globally connected world, we have no shortage of actual rebels, actual activists, actual bloody revolutionaries even. We have movements and movements full of people who are actually interested in pushing boundaries, both musically and politically. Perhaps it's time we leave the boomer shock rockers to themselves and let them wonder where their audience went. Thanks for watching.
You, sir, are a demented, sick, degenerate, barbaric, naughty freako.
Why, thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching this rockin' video. If you want to be a rebel, like, it's so fucking cringe, I can't do it. Thank you for watching to the end. Hey, if you like this, or any of my other stuff, or if you just want me to shut the fuck up, and then you're going to need to give me money, because I need it to live, and I can't retire without it. So if you give me £10 million, then I will retire from YouTube forever, and you won't need to hear my voice or see my tits ever again. So that'd be nice, wouldn't it? If you want to do that, you can donate it to me, either on Ko-fi or PayPal, links below, or sign up to my Patreon. I mean, that would be the hardest thing to do if you want me to shut the fuck up. But, you know, you could give me £10,000 a month, and then I will definitely stay away. Yeah? Sound good? if you do want to do that, you can as well get some benefits for signing up to my Patreon, such as early access to all my videos, exclusive content, including interview with Jessie Gender that just came out. You get to join the Patrons Discord, get my Nintendo Switch friend code, discounts on any future merchandise, and you get your name read out at the end of each video. Just like Raven Tempest, Shield Vaden, Robin Podolsky, Infernal Ramblings, Exploding Turtle, Casual Observer, Terry Roberts, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Philippa Tabrogger, Sober Piglet, Meredith Matthews, Floor IS, Artie Wolf, Hayden Gaylor, Greg Noble, No Kings, Any Fools, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, PJ Lesbrel, Howard Lott, Lara Van Loon, Nara Nia Scarjan, and Joey Cobalt. That last bit had a bit of the rhythm of the Vuvuzela going off. Maybe I should add that in. Anyway, thank you so much for all your help. It means the world to me. And see you all next time.
It's not a good song. It's just catchy. Poison's good. That's a good song.